Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 65 of the Whitey and Wills Sports Show. Today is Wednesday, February 8th, and we have a guest that, I think if you're a person who watches this show, the great number of people that watch the show, I don't really think this guest needs any introduction, but I'm going to anyway. Guy that we talked about on last week's show that we were trying to get on. We've got them all sorted out. We've got the connection made, and we are glad to have Ken Crawford on the show. Coach, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. One of the greatest basketball minds that we've had on this show. Not Mike Wilson, notwithstanding, of course.
I don't know about basketball mind, but hey, we can thank Miss Morgan Wilson for this. She came over yesterday. And within 2 minutes, she solved a problem that it took me Sunday about an hour and several deleted expletives, and I never did get it. Didn't quite. So she took care of it. But hey, I got to tell you guys something about podcasts. You know, podcasts are nothing new. Okay, I mean the technology is new somewhat, but the podcast. We were doing podcasts when I was a kid in the late 50s and early 60s. Yeah, I grew up in a little town, Ridgeway, in southern Illinois. We had to entertain ourselves. And there was a weed that grew. It was kind of a viney weed. And for lack of a better name, we called it a milkweed. And it had a pod on it, about this long, about 4 or 5 inches long, maybe an inch and a half, through. And every evening we would get together, the neighborhood kids, and we go pick these pods and divide them up. And then we would have we threw these pods at each other. We call them milkweed fights. And during milkweed season, that's how we entertained ourselves. Every night there was a milkweed fight. There were it was kind of like a knife fight. There weren't any rules, but we had a lot of fun with it. And it wasn't quite as destructive as green walnut fights, because during green walnut season, those walnuts, they really hurt, but not quite as bad as green pear fights. Now, the green pear fights, that was really tough. One day I'm walking home from school, and my buddy Tommy Cotter is about 20 feet ahead of me, and his sister, who is a year younger than Tommy, so she's somewhere between Tommy and my age. She's about 10 feet ahead of him, and I saw a green pear laying in the neighbor's yard, and I pick it up, and I holler, "Hey, Cotter!" And Tommy turns around, and I cut loose of that green pear. Well, he ducks and it hits his sister right in the back of the head. And she dropped like a spoon-lead sinker in the Wabash. Boom. And I could tell you, Mrs. Cotter, her mother, who was a sweet lady, she was mad as a Japanese general on VJ Day. I'm telling you, it was not a happy experience. So podcasts are nothing new. So I just want to get that off my chest while we're talking.
Kenny, I'm just going to tell you, you've just proven, Larry Wilson says duct tape can fix anything. And you have to ask Crawford one question, and he'll talk for frickin' 30 minutes. So, see, you've just proven that. So,
you didn't even ask the question.
Now, I want to point out before we get started here that on this little panel we've got here, there are, I believe, 742 varsity basketball wins between the three of us, and I don't have any. And
did you count that one I had that second year at Hudsonville?
I did, and I did not count the forfeit that you said that you took. It doesn't show up on your.
Yeah, they wouldn't play us. It was too cold, but I'm counting it.
But 662 of those belong to our esteemed guest between his 4-year stint in Rossville, Alvin, and of course the 26 years in T-Town, which is I think what most of our viewers are going to want to hear about, but not very many coaches have been able to stack up quite that many. Quite a career that this man had, and he and Mike Wilson went head to head on a few occasions, and I'm sure that will come up. But I'm going to kind of get out of the way and let them talk. Mike, I'm sure you've got plenty to bring up here.
I got all kinds of questions. First off, I want to know, Kenny, what are your kids doing?
Well, I've got, of course, I had 3 children. Joseph was born in 1986. He was born on Wednesday after the state tournament in 1986. and he's always been a pretty good kid. I mean, he waited around until after the state tournament to show up, so that's great. And his mother was really happy. His mother was very happy about that. But Joe, all of my kids went to SIU, and they got their undergraduate, and then they went off and did their thing. Well, in their late 20s or mid 30s now, they've all decided to kind of change directions. And Joe graduated from law school. He's now a public defender in the city of Chicago.
Really?
And, yeah. And Katie and Matt, the twins, came along in '88, and they weren't quite as cooperative. They were born in January, right in the middle of basketball season, and they have been less cooperative since, I might add. But at any rate, Katie, she was a career counselor. She went to Southern and then had a math degree and decided she really didn't want to teach math, and she got a graduate degree in educational guidance and was a career counselor at Southeast Missouri University and in the engineering department at the University of California, Berkeley. She decided she wanted to get out of education and actually got into the private sector. Did not like it. She's now getting ready. She's applying. She's finished all her prerequisites. She's going to go back to nursing school. So she's gone back to school. So I'll have another one back in school. Matthew, when he was about 29 or so, he decided he needed to change directions. He went to chiropractor school. He's now a chiropractor in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So that's kind of where the kids are at now. So speaking of kids, where's Zach at? Morgan.
He's down in Nashville. Kenny, he's in Nashville. He's living the dream in Nashville, Tennessee. Right. He works 3 days a week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 13 hours.
Really? Yeah. Was he in Texas for a while?
In where? I'm sorry?
In Texas for a while.
No, he's been in he was at Carbondale, went to SIU, and his last clinical was in radiology, was in MRI and CAT scan, and he got to go to Vanderbilt University. And they hired him about 3/4 of the way through his clinical, and he's fantastic. He works 3 days a week, living in Nashville, loves it.
That sounds like a dream to me.
And my daughter's a junior at Indiana University. We get to go over there. We're going over there in a couple of weeks to watch a basketball game. So
fantastic. Good.
I got to tell you a story about her. Jessica's pretty tiny. She weighs about 120 pounds, dripping wet, and she got hired at this sports bar called Yogi's, and she couldn't be a server yet because she was only 19. She couldn't do that until she was 20. So she was the bouncer at the door. Okay. First week of school, big black guy and a couple of his buddies come up to the door, and at that time of the evening, you had to be 21 to get in. And kid shows her ID, and she looks at it. She goes, "Okay." And his buddy goes, I'm only 19. She goes, "Well, I can't let you in." So they leave, and they were real cool. And one of the bartenders runs up and goes, "Jess, you know who you just turned down?" She goes, "I have no idea. That was Trace Jackson Davis. Her All-American. You didn't let him in the bar." She goes, "I don't care. His buddy wasn't 21. I wasn't getting my ass in trouble."
Hey, nothing wrong with that. Matter of fact, I have been to Yogi's, believe it or not. Yeah. One of the, and I won't mention names, one of the esteemed eye doctors here in town who is a very big Indiana fan. He and I went to a game once, and I think we stopped there.
That's good. I've had a few meals and a few drinks there, so it's a neat place.
Great place.
So you and Patty enjoyed retirement.
Absolutely.
And going to get warm enough to start fishing here pretty soon, isn't it?
It is, and I'm ready. It's that time. I'm not a cold weather fisherman.
So. All right, got a couple questions for you. When you first came to T-Town, Kenny, when you replaced Lawrence, what was going through your head as that first basketball season was upon you?
Well, I'm going to be quite honest with you. When I started my last year, I was at Rossville for 4 years.
Right.
And I had done, I thought about all I could do. And the first day of school, my last year there at Rossville, I went to the principal and he and I were very good friends. And I said, I said, Mr. Grant, I said, I got to tell you something. I said, this is going to be my last year here. I said, I'm going to move on down the road. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to move on down the road. And I said, but I appreciate it if you didn't tell, the Board of Education or anybody, I said, at the appropriate time, I'll do that. And he said, fine. And he said, the only thing I wish I could go with you, because he wanted to go somewhere else too. But at any rate, so I waited till the spring of the year, and I was rehired, and I waited a week or so, and I went in and I resigned. So I really didn't know what I was going to do. And I was sitting in the, in my office, in the guidance office there at Rossville High School. And I had the Eastern Placement Bulletin. Mm-hmm. And I looked, and it had a job opening in Teutopolis. And I had heard of Teutopolis. I knew that they had some pretty good ball clubs. Other than that, I didn't know much about it, at all. So I applied. And at that point in time, my mindset was such, I didn't know if I wanted to stay in coaching and education. I just wasn't sure. I had a background in underground mining construction, and there were some opportunities there. So, but I sent the application in, and I got an interview, and I didn't. Anytime I walked into an interview and I felt that I'd done well, I didn't get the job. Mm-hmm. I walked in an interview when I thought I really blew this one, and you get offered the job. Well, that's what happened. Well, I was offered the job on a Thursday. Tom Wolf, superintendent of schools, called me and said, we'd like to have you come and be a guidance counselor and a basketball coach here, and teach you'll have to teach a couple of classes too. And I said, well, Tom, I'd given, some thought. And I said, I tell you, Tom, I said, I've got an opportunity to go to Colorado. I had a brother working in the underground construction business. And I said, I've got an opportunity to go out there and go back underground. I said, I think I'm going to do that. And he said, hey, he knew a little bit about my family background and knew my brother had coached and taught. He says, why don't you, before you turn this down, call your brother, talk with him, call me back Monday, and then give me your decision. So I called my brother. I talked it over with my wife, and to be honest with you, Patty was not really sold on going to Colorado. So I had to factor that in. Talked to my brother, and he said, hey, you've got a job out here if you want it, but it's not what you think it is out here. He said, my advice to you is to take that job and give it a try. So I called Tom back, and I owe Tom Wolf a lot on this, because a lot of superintendents, some superintendents have a tendency to be a little arrogant. Believe that or not, but
just a little.
Yeah, and at any rate, many of them would have just told me to shove it where the sun doesn't shine. But he told me to think about it a couple of days. I did. I went back. I accepted the job. And throughout that first year, I was still on the fence. Should I be doing this, or should I not be doing this? Even into the first part of the second year, but I started kind of catching fire the second year, and then I realized I had made the right choice, and that's where it came. So that was kind of my mindset that first year. Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing these kids justice? And I probably wasn't doing them justice anyway. I mean, because
you started what, 81, 82 was your first year, correct?
81, 82 was the first year.
Okay.
So that's kind of the backdrop on how I got where I was. And
a couple of years later, you're king of the hill.
Well, yeah, you get good players, good things happen, and yeah, we were 5 years in, and we, I had not won a regional yet, and but fortunately, I had a pretty good bunch of kids, and they did go 33-0 and won the state tournament. So pretty good run for those kids.
Yeah, and I remember that was my first year I was coaching with Dave at St. Anthony. I remember, and I got out of school, I knew you a little bit. You lived down the street from my mom and dad. I still remember Dad was like, one year at Christmas, he goes, hey, I got to be right back. I said, where are you headed? He goes, I'm taking a gift down to the Crawford kids for Christmas. I go, really? He goes, yeah, I'm taking some books. Hell, their dad can't read. Somebody's got to give them. So.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah. That was a great neighborhood.
It was.
It was a great neighborhood. Mike, we've still got wonderful memories of down on Parkview Street.
Oh yeah, but and I'll tell you, that was my first exposure as a quote coach in that quote St. Anthony T-Town rivalry. And I think the thing, it didn't surprise me, but I don't think people knew how close you and Dave Bartlett were as friends. You know, you coached the quote biggest rivalry in probably the state of Illinois, and you know, you guys were good friends.
Oh yeah, you know, that was one of the things, and that's probably one of the things that there's not a lot of things that I miss about coaching, to be quite honest, but there are some, and one of them is the camaraderie of the coaches. You know, now we were fierce rivals, no matter who we played.
Yeah.
You know, you wanted to beat that guy, he wanted to beat you, but it wasn't this thing where after the game, you know, you hated each other. You know, we got together and you know, we were all fighting the same battles, the same wars, you know, and Dave Bartlett and I were very good friends, and he was and is just a great guy, and of course we won't talk on the air about the tradition that started there that carried on through you and Ron Nieberge before the T-Town St. Anthony game, or if we happen to see each other scouting, but you can chuckle about that one.
You know, it was at the state tournament is when I experienced it in '86 when you guys, because Bartlett goes watch, and you have your special wave you give Dave, and he gives it right back to you.
Yeah, we did. It was somewhat in sign language, you know, and it was.
And sometimes it was subtle, you know.
He just showed me I was number one, you know.
It was amazing how many times the bridge of your nose would itch, and you know.
Yeah, that's right. You got to adjust your glasses, and sometimes usually it just takes one finger, you know. And
it does.
Yeah, that was, you know, and that was a lot of fun. Well, you know, guys, there were coaches. Guys were friends back then. They got together. You know, I hear officials talk about this too. Older officials saying they can remember back when everybody met at a bar in Effingham after the games. The referees did for years.
Get together at Nemers.
That's exactly right. The brass rail. They don't do it anymore. I mean, it doesn't happen much. But that was the time for them to get together, share war stories. You know, I have never met a coach, whether it be a junior high coach, a high school coach, a college coach. It doesn't make any difference. That if you listen to them, instead of talking, if you just listen to them, you'll learn something. And you know, it may be a junior high coach from Newmarket. You know, we used to have a little town outside of Ridgeway. It was actually a crossroads, and nobody lived there. We called it. They had a fictional basketball team, the Newmarket Bulldogs, and so at any rate, that's where that came from. But at any rate, you know, if you listen to them, they'll share stuff with you, and you can learn something. And so you make a lot of really good friends. And there's none of this, well, you beat me and I'm mad at you. I have seen coaches like that, to be honest with you. If you beat them, they were mad at you. I always thought that's pretty juvenile. It's just my feeling, you know.
Yeah. And, you know, another thing
their job is to beat me and my job is to beat them. So, you know, all's fair in love and war. It's all
you get caught. You were pretty good at your job. So let's just, you know.
Well, I don't know about I don't know about that, but I had a lot of fun with it.
You know, and the other thing you started doing, and I know it was when Ronnie was coaching, when I was helping Ronnie for a couple of years. I mean, you'd have our St. Anthony staff over for the border battle at your house. Anything left over in your freezer that was wild game, you'd cook up. And I wasn't always sure what we'd read. It was always good. And then you'd get your guitar out. You'd serenade us with some tunes.
Oh yeah, Bill Martin would come over. Oh, there's a lot of stuff. Right. And people just don't realize that. They think just because, you know, your rivals or your adversaries on the court. I mean, we were friends. There were guys. Yep. I can name tons, and I do miss that camaraderie amongst the coaches. The things I miss about coaching are, number one, the camaraderie of the coaches. I do miss being with the kids and my staff. You know, that was good, and the relationships that you built. And honestly, although there might be a few to many officials that might not agree, but I enjoyed the camaraderie with the officials too, particularly as I got older and realized that I couldn't coach and referee at the same time. When I was younger, I didn't quite realize, and as I got older, I realized you got to pick your points, pick your times, and there's some certain battles you don't wear, and don't argue block charges. I mean, sit down. And on that vein, like your dad said, you turn me loose. But here's one thing that if this podcast gets out to anybody, I hope it educates a few people. And that's the fact, if you don't know the rules and you're in the stands, keep your mouth shut.
Morgan sat by you at the Santa game the other night. And she said somebody started arguing, and you turned to her and if you don't know the goddamn rules, don't say anything.
Well, the thing of it is, it's how long ago? Maybe you remember when they changed the over and back rule. Now today, well, let's educate the community. You have to have both feet and the basketball have to cross that center line. Three parts, all three, or you are still in the backcourt. Okay. You let some kid put 1 foot over that backcourt, keep his other foot in the backcourt and the ball, and pull it back, and you got 30 people in the stands hollering over and back. And I mean, they're just looking. And so if nobody learns anything else out of this podcast, please learn that. It's both feet and the ball. And there's other parts of the rule book it'd be a doggone good idea to read and understand.
Oh my God! Now,
if you don't know what a false double foul is, then don't try to officiate.
You mentioned the block charge last night. Morgan was at the Effingham-Charleston game last night. She told me something they called, I've never heard of in my life, Kenny. They called a double foul, but it was a block charge double foul.
Yep. Yes, sir.
They called the block here. One official, I got the block. One official had the charge, so they called it a double foul. And I've seen, I saw Jack Scott call a lot of double fouls, but it was never a block charge.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But here's Mike, I saw that, and I would say it's been 6 or 7 years ago in the El Dorado Holiday Tournament. Gallatin County was playing El Dorado.
Okay.
And that's, you better be 30 points better than El Dorado to beat them on their court during that holiday tournament. Those referees back there. But they had exactly the same thing. Really? A Ridgeway kid, and he was a really good scorer, or a Gallatin County kid. He was a really good scorer. He drove in, and the underneath official had a block on the El Dorado player. The out official came in and said, I have a charge. They assessed both of them a foul. The problem is the Gallatin County kid, that his fourth. That made a huge impact in that game because it sent him to the bench in the third quarter, and he was a really big-time scorer. So I have seen that. I could tell you who the officials' names were. I think, pretty sure it was Mike Austin and Guy Alonji were the two officials that made the call. And, I didn't know that. I still don't understand that rule. So maybe I don't try to referee from the stand. I just kind of sit there. Now, I did mine early in my career from that bench, so I just keep my mouth shut and listen to everybody else go crazy.
Well, okay. So let me ask you something then. Did you ever get run? Did you ever get run from a game?
Yes, Mike. Mike can tell you when.
I was on the bench. It was at Effingham.
It sure was. It was in Effingham, and it would have been 96 or 97.
Now, here's the best part, Dustin. It was the JV game.
Yeah, I got thrown out of the JV game. There's a long story behind that, and I won't go into the whole thing. But Jim Littleford was the AD, and I'll just tell a story real quick if you got time. So I get kicked out of the JV game, and I deserved it. I called the referee same name twice. I got the first text, and I thought, well, it worked the first time. Let's just grab it again, and I did. So I got the second text, so I'm kicked out. Well, that was the first year that they brought in the rule that if you got thrown out of a game, you could not coach the next game. Okay. Was that the way it was, Mike? You couldn't coach it until there had been a game played at your level.
Right.
Okay.
So you
couldn't.
You had to sit in the locker room all night.
That's right. So I had to sit that Effingham game out. Okay. And but what happened was I was kind of like these fans I just criticized. I evidently read the rule and didn't understand it. And Steve DeClerc was the varsity official. And so I went up and I said, Steve, I'm coaching this game. He said, Coach, Ken, you can't. I said, hey, it says I can't coach the next game. I said, this is this game. He said, Ken, he said, you cannot coach again until there is a game play, until you set out one game at your level. And I said, you better be right. And he said, I'm right. So I went down, sure enough. I later checked, and Steve DeClerc was right. Steve DeClerc was a great referee, a great official. And at any rate, so I go down the locker room. Jim Littleford, he's the AD at Effingham. He comes down and said, Ken, he said, sorry about that. And I said, well, hell, I deserve it. I said, I know what I did. And he said, is there anything I can get you? And I said, a radio would be nice. So he said, I could do it. So he heads up the stairs. I said, hey, wait. I said, hey, Jim, I said, could you get me a pint of whiskey too? and he said, no, Coach, don't think I can. Well, my storekeeper, Doug Smith, is coming down the stairs about that time. And Doug laughs and looks at him and said, Coach, I'll go to the liquor store and get you a pint of whiskey if you want. I said, no. I said, I'm just teasing Doug. So, but I sat in the locker room for that game. And Rodney Grimsley coached that game. And I'll tell you, God's truth, if I'd been coaching the game, I'm not so certain we would have won it. He made a late game substitution. It was a foul situation. Kid got in foul trouble. He made a late game substitution. I probably would have selected another player to go in that situation. It's a tight ball game. And the player he put in had not proven himself to be a really good free throw shooter. But this kid came in the game, and I think he scored about 6 points in the last minute and a half of the game. So, I mean, that's a situation where it worked out a lot better for the kids that I was sitting down in the locker room listening to the game with no whiskey.
And I'll tell you, good ball game, close ball game, two good teams that night. And right. I remember, Rodney being put on the hot seat. And he did good, and like I said, did a good job. Won a close, tight ball game.
Rodney Grimsley had just a phenomenal basketball mind. Not any better than he would tell you.
He would let you know how good he was.
Yeah, he let you know it. But then Rodney and I still are just very, very close. I've been very blessed in my career to have good players and really good assistant coaches. I mean, I've had some really good ones through the years. So and that's a blessing, because you don't do it all by yourself. If you don't have players, you don't have coaches, you're just not going to be able to succeed.
Now, Kenny, I got to ask you about 86 when you guys went to state. And I know at some point after the fact, when you and I were talking at some point, you said, I don't care how good you are, you got to get lucky. And, and that resonated with me because, I got you on a pedestal as a coach. I watched you, and then I coached against you. And first time, pretty intimidated that first time I had to coach against you. I got over it, but, I think when the officials called us together at the scores table in the early in that first game, and we were, they were kind of starting to let you get out of the box. Some guys would, some guys wouldn't. And I don't remember who the officials were. And they called us together. Now, Coach Wilson, you got to quit complaining about Coach Crawford being out of the box. I'm like, what? I didn't say anything. And you're like, God damn it. And then I was like, then the guy starts laughing. He goes, hey, let's just keep it under control. A lot of excitement here tonight. But that just kind of broke the tension bubble with me at that point. And that was, pretty good. But, yeah, it was you were pretty intimidating to coach against. I will say that.
I will tell you a humorous story about young coaches. You remember Scott Bales, who coached at Neoga? Great guy. Mm-hmm. Went up to Shelbyville. I mean, just a great guy, great coach, great person. And I think it was his first varsity game. He came to Teutopolis, and we used to play them we play them on Wednesday before Thanksgiving for our homecoming game. Then we'd go up there about the last Friday before Christmas, their homecoming game. So it was a home and home situation each year. And it was Scott's first year. Well, Scott came up and he shakes hands, and I said, hey, Scott, I said, good luck to you, not tonight, but good luck to you. and I said, but I got a piece of advice for you. And he said, ooh, and he got really serious. He said, what's that, Coach? I said, well, Coach, I said, here's the deal. I said, do you remember Lyle Casper? He goes, yeah, I know who Lyle Casper is. I said, yeah. I said, he beat me 3 times my first year here. And I said, Neoga, a couple of years later, they weren't happy with him. He went over to Altamont and did a great job over there. And he said, yeah. I said, well, do you remember Mike Powell? Yeah, he coached. I said, Mike Powell last year, I said, Mike beat us a couple times, and he beat us his last year there, and then they fired him. He goes, really? I said, hey, by the way, Scott, I said, do you know John Brown? He goes, yeah. He said, I replaced John Brown. I said, yeah, John Brown beat us last year, and they fired him. I said, my advice to you is don't beat my ass tonight. That broke the ice. He laughed. I laughed. We were friends from that point on. I mean, those are the types of things you did in those days that if people had any idea the things that went on down on those benches, they wouldn't believe it. Because if you're not having fun, if you're not having fun at it, get out of business. Go find something else to do. You got to have fun.
But you're right. It's the camaraderie. I remember Paul Higginbotham and I were close. Paul was at Lawrenceville. Absolutely. And I still to this day give him grief because when I had to play only in the sectional, been your last year, they had a kid get, I think it was a St. Pierre kid. After the regional game, violated team rules, got kicked off the team, couldn't play in the sectional. And Higginbotham was telling me, hey, you got to be careful. These guys played better without St. Pierre. Late in the year, he was kind of a head case. And he goes, I'm telling you, Flanagan and I talked. Flanagan's told me how much better they play. So being the dumbass I am, we're talking before the first sectional game. And I said, Rob, I'm a little worried about you guys. I said, I hear you guys play better with St. Pierre. He goes, whoever told you that's one of the dumbest son of bitches in the world? He goes, he just started chewing my ass. And I look up and I can see Higginbotham in the hospitality and just laugh. And I was like, hey, thanks, buddy.
Set you up, didn't he? Yeah.
He set me up. And of course, I was dumb enough to walk into it.
That's hilarious. A lot of good times with coaching, guys. Just a lot of fun.
So that first trip to 86.
Yeah, there was a question there, and I think you got carried away and didn't.
Yeah, I know. It's contagious tonight, but getting lucky because in that super sectional, pretty good ball player you faced.
Hey, Jesse Hall, heck of a player. They had a heck of a good ball club. They had an 8-point lead with 1:54 to go. And if everything doesn't go your way, when you're down 8 points with 1:54 to go, there's no 3-point shot. There's no 8-point shot, and we got, now don't get me wrong. You make some of your luck, but a ball bounces one way and you get it, ball bounces another way, they get it. At one point in time, I will tell you that we had a 1-2-2 zone press that we had to put on them. We had no other choice. They wanted to go to somewhat of a delay game, and of course we fouled them, and they missed some free throws. That's I can't control that, so that's got to be luck, and so they missed some free throws. Big play within the last minute. We've got the 1-2-2 on them, and my point guy on that 1-2-2 is, in those days, it was a technical foul to be over that line, over the end line. I had a player not over the line. He was 3 feet over the line, guarding the guy with the ball out of bounds. The referee didn't call it. Now, I don't know why the referee didn't call it, but they turned the ball over and we scored. And so that was luck of the referee not seeing. I don't think the referee was dishonest. I think he had, I don't know what he was doing, but at any rate, I thought we're going to get teched up, and we didn't. So, another ball game that many people would forget about that year was the semifinals of the sectional. Teutopolis had never won a boys sectional, until 1986. So the Monkey's kind of there on the back, and we're playing a highly talented Martinsville team. Martinsville's a very small school, but I'm telling you something right now. Basketball amongst small schools was one mean son of a gun. I'm telling you, and they had the Loritzen boys. They were good. We turned the ball over one time in that game, and they turned it over twice. And they may have turned it over three times. I know we turned it over once, and maybe they had it two or three. But
Now, was that at Newton, Kenny?
That was at Newton. And
Yeah,
so and both teams were really good defensive teams, even though it's a high scoring game. Both teams were really getting after it on both ends of the floor. And you're going to get a situation where the ball goes off of somebody and maybe you grab it or maybe you don't. And that's the difference in a 2, 3, 4, 5 point ball game. Because that was a 1 or 2 point game the whole game until about the last minute. I think we may have won by 3 or 4. I don't know. But at any rate, you have to have, you're going to make a lot of your luck, but you've got to have a little bit of luck. And even, I guess a lot of very, very egotistical coaches might say that they don't have any luck, that they make all their luck, but they're full of, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now, that was Randy Bishop, wasn't it? Wasn't Randy at Martinsville at that time?
Randy Bishop was.
He told me
he had replaced Steve Bennett. Steve Bennett on. Both Randy Bishop and Steve Bennett are very good friends of mine. And Steve went on as an assistant to Mike Cruz at the University of Evansville. He later went on and won a state championship at Newcastle High School, which has the largest gym, or did have the largest high school gym in the United States. So that's where Steve went, and Randy took over for him. And we've been friends for many, many years, Randy Bishop and I.
Bitch always said that he played a perfect game and still got beat by 4 points.
Yeah, it was those kids.
That's a good ball game. There's no doubt about
it. Yeah. So, but you have to have a little luck. There's no question about it.
So, go ahead, Dustin.
No, go for it. This is you.
You got back several times. Never got that big trophy again.
Right.
God, you had some good teams that went up there. Just
yeah. Well,
honestly,
if I'd been a better coach, there could probably be a couple more trophies. I'm honest, the curse of coaching. I think one of the curses of coaching is you never forget the losses. Those losses are burned into your. If you're competitive, it's burned into your makeup. Mm-hmm. They kind of blend together, whatever. But those losses, they really stick up. And I can go back. I'm not going to do it on this podcast, but I could go back and show you places where I made mistakes. I'm not worried about what those Hanyaks in the stands think were my mistakes, because they don't count and they don't know. But I got a pretty good idea when I've made some decisions. And I think I really hurt some of our teams with some of the decisions I made in some of those tight games. 94, that was a 1 point ball game, against a very talented Pinckneyville team. I could go on and on, of the mistakes that were made. But I was fortunate to take a few teams up there, and all the kids, they made us proud, because they really competed. We didn't get blown out. The 98 team went up there, and they were a little bit unexpected, because I think people expected St. Anthony to beat us in the regional, and we did get that regional. And then we played an undefeated Spring Valley Hall team, and they were ranked number 1 and been there the year before, and we're a highly competitive game. And then in, of course, 2000, we had to go to overtime to get out of the quarterfinals. Nashville played us a whale of a ball game. Darren Lee coached a great year. And 2006, we that particular team, we ran into Seneca. Seneca had either got second or third the year before, had all the kids
I'll
back.
tell you a Seneca story when you're done.
Yeah, well, they were undefeated, and we maintained a lead in that ball game for about 28 minutes. And, and like I said, I can look back on a lot of decisions that I made in a lot of these games that could have tilted that. Same thing in 2007. Great ball club, great group of kids. They got, of course, the 2000 team got second. That team got third in 2007. Merle game was one that I think I made some key errors in that game. because we had a 13-point lead in the second half, and we ended up getting beaten in a double overtime.
Double overtime.
Yeah.
Although, to be fair to yourself, I think a lot of people were saying that, and I can speak more intelligently on this just because this is the one that I actually saw, but a lot of people were they were giving Nashville they were giving them most of the odds in that quarterfinal game. And, and you guys took it to them, I think that most of the smart running in the southern half of the state was on them.
But they were very good.
Great ball game.
They had powdered us pretty good a couple of weeks before that in the shootout at Riverton. And we picked up some things, and I got some help from some coaches who knew something about them and got some ideas. We gambled in that game, quite honestly. Lucas O'Rear was a tremendous player for them, obviously, and they had another 6'9" kid whose name escapes me right now. And they had good guards. Patrick Weathers, whose team won the state tournament last year, he was a guard. And they had good guards too. O'Rear had a tendency in that he had a tendency when he caught the ball in anywhere in a post, which 15, 16 feet, if he turned to the baseline, he could go either way. If he turned to the baseline, he was probably going to shoot the basketball. If he turned toward the middle, he was normally going to pass out, and so to this opposite side of the floor. So what we did, we gambled. They hit the three pretty well at Riverton, and they scored from every place at Riverton. So I said, we got to cut something off. If you're gonna take something away defensively, you're going to give something up. So we put Andy Tipton Andy was probably 6'2", and O'Rear, was a man. He was a big guy. And I said, Andy, you're going to guard him, and you're going to play split fronts on him. And I said, you just keep both hands up. And I said, and keep your rear low. And I said, we're going to have help right behind you. I said, so you just keep those hands up and you keep him behind you. And what we did is we brought the guy, the weak side guy in and got on his baseline side, having him turn to the middle so he would pass out. And what we gambled at on doing that was I took some really good shooters to Peoria. We had some kids that went to Peoria that were very, very, very good outside shooters, and they struggled to shoot in Carver Arena. Difficult place to shoot for some reason, but that open area for some reason causes them trouble. And I said, maybe these these Nashville kids, they'll miss a few threes. They're, for lack of a better term, their anal sphincter might tighten up a little bit where you can't drive a 10-penny nail in it with a sledgehammer, and maybe we'll be okay. And fortunately, they missed some threes. I think they got a little tight. We got a little lead. We had to do some defensive switching in there. We did move from between a little bit of zone, a little bit of man-to-man. But the big gamble was basically double teaming him on that baseline side. We had a guy in front of him, a guy behind him, having him turn the other way and throw out. We were giving up the corner three and probably giving up the three all the way up almost to the free throw line. So we were giving that shot up, but they weren't hitting it. So that was a gamble, and it was a gamble that paid off. So like you said, sometimes you got to have a little luck. And that's the whole strategy. That was the whole thing.
At Christmas, when we gambled that way, Kenny, Dylan York came out of the doghouse and hit 4 threes in the second quarter against us. So,
absolutely,
that's what it was. But the year before in 2006, I was on the IBCA All-State Selection team. I think I took Ronnie Niebury's spot on that team. So for that state tournament, I'm in that meeting the day before, and I'm sitting with Kurt Reed, and I'm sitting with Gary Shirley, Scott Bales, and who was it? Who was at DuQuoin? Mike Cruz. So we're all sitting together. So I'm getting an education, as you can understand. Well,
that was a little cabal that had been formed many, many years before. before.
Yes,
Because that whole process could get pretty political from time to time.
it was. Yes, it
the
was.
ball had been in place for a while. So go right ahead with your
Yeah,
story.
Curdy Reed says, Coach Wilson, you just listen to me and I'll help you.
Right. And when Coach Reed looked at and they put a kid's name up there, and Coach Reed said, "He's a real sumbitch. You better put him on the team because he was good."
So whoever represented Seneca, that area of the state, got up and was speaking. And I think he nominated 4 of their kids first team. And he did everything but say, hey, we've seen these guys, blah, blah, blah. They're going to walk through the state. They're going to win this tournament hands down easy, blah, blah, blah. So it gets our turn to start nominating, and Kurt's the nominator. And of course, he, as only he can say, he says, Coach, before I nominate our kids, he said, I hope those Seneca boys are pretty good because they're going to be guarded tomorrow like they've never been guarded. He goes, I guarantee you they ain't going to walk through T-Town. Them boys is going to come prepared, and they're going to guard the crap out of Seneca. So we just going to see how good these guys are. So they're laughing afterwards about, yeah, those guys don't know how good Seneca is. Well, yeah, they didn't know how good you guys were. I still remember watching that game, just dying, going, oh, man, this is exactly what Kurt said was going to happen. And
yeah, Curry's a great coach, and just a great mind with the game, and had a lot of fun to boot. And like I said, if he said the player was a sumbitch, you better vote for him because he was good.
Well, he said that about when he nominated Lucas O'Rear. He goes, now he's only a junior, but down home we call him a bitch.
Yeah.
Says, now next year when he's a senior, he's going to be a son bitch.
That was Curdy.
Oh, I tell you what, I had so much fun at the meetings listening to him and Cruz, and Gary Shirley just laugh and laugh. But all right, got a question for you. All the people you coached against, best player you ever coached against? Well,
one thing that I've never done, and I'm not dodging the question. I'm just going to be quite honest, Mike. I have been asked the question many times: who's your best player? Who's your best team? Who's the best player you ever played against? I've got ideas. I think it takes a lot of different things to make a player or to make a good team, and every kid makes a contribution. So I've never answered that question for a couple of reasons. Number one, if I say this player is the best player I ever coached, that's putting down every other kid ever coached. Okay. And I just won't do that. And same way with the team. Plus, if I answered that question, just think of all the fun I'd take away from the guys at KC Hall. I mean, they've been on this stuff for years, so I'm taking away all their fun. Plus, it just gives them
5 names, 6 names.
Yeah, and it gives them another reason to say, well, that dumb son bitch in Crawford, you know what he said, and he ain't right. So, I mean, I hate to say, I didn't want to create a bunch of fun for him or spoil a bunch of fun for him. So I really, and I have coached against some really good players. I mean, I've been fortunate in that. I mean, just a lot. I mean, I could name a lot of kids and some really good teams. I mean, when you're looking at some of those teams that Edwardsville brought back down there through the years. Matter of fact, in 2005, it was the 05-06, so it would be the 05 holiday tournament. That Edwardsville team was phenomenal. That's when they had they had the big. Well, they had Stewart, they had Ilaria, they had the big kid who went to SLU.
Yeah, I can see him. I can't think of his name. I know who you're talking about.
But they had about 3 or 4 Division I players, and their point guard was a Division I football player. But I wouldn't even say they were the best team we ever played. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't put them. I'm not saying they were very, very good, but I'm not going to identify any team or any player. It's just not fair, I don't think, to the other players who played the game and gave everything. Sometimes our most valuable player as far as I was concerned, was a senior who was, let's say we had 7 or 8 seniors, the senior sitting at the end of the bench who came to practice every night, tried to make us better, and maybe got a couple of minutes at the end of a game.
You know that,
and was positive about it. And those guys were most important. And I made doggone sure that our players understood that too, that, you might be starting, but these guys come to practice every night and give everything they have to make you better, and they don't bitch. So I don't want to hear you bitch about anything.
Yeah, that, and I don't know if I'm just more in tune to it lately, but I feel like hearing coaches interviewed lately, just in the last couple of weeks, I've heard several guys talk about how good their practices are, how competitive it is, how it's really difficult for them to decide who those, 6, 7, 8 kids that are going to see most of the minutes during the games are. And I just feel like that's probably a situation that you had a lot of years just because of the depth of your program, how many athletes there always are on a roster at T-Town. Lots of good players, so there's lots of good work being done behind the scenes. I have to imagine it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun was had in your programs, just on the practice court.
We did, and it was a lot of intensity. I mean, a lot of guys want to practice 3 hours and screw around 2 hours while they're doing it. Me, I'd rather practice an hour and 45 minutes and really get after it. So we just wanted a lot of intensity, and probably one thing that I may or may not have been criticized. I didn't go out looking for compliments, and I didn't give a damn about the criticisms. But I didn't play. I would say I was not a free substituter. I mean, 5, 6, 7 players, and they're going to see most of the time. And we built a program doing that and bring them up. So consequently, we had a lot of juniors playing on the JV. Freshmen, sophomores played on the fresh soft team. Some sophomores got to play JV. Occasionally, on a rare occasion, you might get a freshman up on the JV. On a really, really rare occasion, you get a freshman up on the varsity. And that you knew was going to be something, they were going to be something else. But by the same token, so I think a lot of coaches now are probably subbing more, and they're going deeper into their bench, certainly than I did, and not criticizing them and not saying I did it the right way. There's a lot of, I've always felt that there's a lot of ways to get downtown. Everybody finds their way to get downtown. So I'm not going to sit back and criticize somebody else for the way they get downtown, as long as they don't criticize me for the way I get downtown, because I'm going to run through the alleys.
Kenny, Dustin and I just last podcast we mentioned
people hide their whiskey bottles when I was a kid.
That's right, they know. But we mentioned the fact that T-Town for a program probably has as few 1,000-point scores as almost anybody, and for that reason,
right,
a lot of kids don't get a lot of minutes, young kids, because there's good kids at those levels generally.
Well, one thing we did, most of our good team, most of our teams, period, we put 5 guys on the floor. At least 4 of those guys might be averaging 14 to 16 points a game. Now, some of those guys would have been capable of scoring 30 or 35 points a game if we would have structured everything around them. But I said, why not have, 5 rocks in your sack that can hit you in the head rather than one big rock? Because if you mess with the big rock, you're dead. So, throw those little rocks, hit singles, don't hit home runs. And so we had guys, and the 1,000-point scorers in our school, you're right, because they came up through the program, and there weren't guys who started from their freshman year on, so there aren't a lot of 1,000-point scorers, but there's a heck of a lot of guys who scored 12 to 14 points a game. If you look at that the state championship team, they were all sitting in that, 16, 15, 14, 13-point range. And on any given night, 1 or 2 of them could go off for 25 apiece.
Yeah, that's exactly what Dustin and I talked about. You spread out the scoring. You had a lot of talented kids, and you didn't have the kid. Brent Nieberge is the anomaly who averaged a lot of points, but very few worked as hard as he did to get those points, but it wasn't like.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were other great scorers on that team. I mean, with Mike Horn, Joey Gear, Eric Swanger, Scotty Niebuhr. I mean, these guys could score. And but Brent was one of those guys. Just feed the big hog and watch him eat. He could, he was a really great player. And but there was some, Mike Horn was one of the best passers that you'd see anywhere. And Eric Swangler, I mean, he's phenomenal point guard. And if you left Joey Gear open, he was going to knock it down. And Scotty could do it too. So, and they all played together. And so it's a situation where we did have Brent, but with the same token, the other guys picked, they scored too. So I would, like I said, I'd rather have that scoring spread out than have the superstar and everybody else spins around the superstar.
No, I agree with you 100%. Now, before we let you go, I'm going to tell you two things. First off, I want to have you on again because, we got so many stories. We haven't even scratched the surface yet. And the 12 people that watch our podcast will like this and we'll hear from them. And, so that'll be good. And second thing, my dad just wrote a book. It's actually getting published.
I actually heard this story, Mike. You can finish, but I heard this the other day. I was playing music with Bill Martin and some of the boys Monday morning with a little bunch we get together, and he said that your dad did he do two books, one for the family?
Yeah, he did one just on his life growing up, and then the other. I got it as a surprise gift. It was supposed to be at Thanksgiving. I actually got it earlier, and just loved it. And then he has one. Actually, it's in the process of getting printed now. It's called 41 Stories, 41 Years, and it's just about broadcasting sports. And one of the stories does involve Ken Crawford and a pair of false teeth.
Well, now you're talking about Ken Crawford or Larry Johnson?
I'm talking about guy at Effingham's teeth flew out of his mouth when he was yelling at the officials, landed right in front of your bench.
Oh, yeah, they did.
And I think the officials told you to pick him up. He said, "I ain't touching those things."
Oh, I thought you were telling. I had an assistant, great assistant, Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson grew up in Benton, Illinois. Great guy, great assistant. And Larry had false teeth, but he never wore them. He could eat a steak. He could eat peanuts. He could eat anything with no teeth. And I asked him, I said, "Don't you have any teeth?" "Yeah." I said, "I got false teeth." I said, "Are you ever going to wear them?" He said, he said, "When I'm dead," he said, "when they fold my hands over in the casket," he said, "lift my hands up. That's where those false teeth will be." True story about Larry Johnson. Great assistant. Great. He was a great friend. But hey, thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it. And by the way, you're talking about podcast and 12 viewers. My oldest boy Joe, the guy who's an attorney in Chicago, he and one of his friends from California do a podcast, and I think it's called Club Manifesto. And I think they said they've got about 12 or 14 viewers. They've done, I think, 12 or 14 episodes of this thing, but their things go on for like an hour and a half. But they go off different tangents.
Dustin and I get long-winded, and ours goes on a while.
Yeah, I mean, we try to we'll get on and say, let's keep this one short this week, and hour and 15 minutes later,
Yeah, obviously you can see what happened to this one. It lasted almost an hour.
Well, listen,
you get Mike and I talking, Dustin. You're gonna have a hard time getting a word in edgewise. Hey guys, I've really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. It's always great to to talk with basketball, and you two guys are doing a great job. And I really, I've said this, and I'm not just polishing your apple. I'm not a very good apple polisher, but I will tell you that I thoroughly enjoy listening to you guys on the radio. I mean, you guys do a great job on the radio doing the games along with Greg and Matt Robinson. It's you do a lot of really good stuff. Sometimes you're full of shit, but I mean, otherwise you're doing a pretty good job.
That's sweet. My goal when I work with Greg Kenny, my goal is to make him laugh once a game, and I just say something stupid and get him laughing.
No, you guys do it. I'm serious. You guys do a really great job, and I really enjoy listening to you on the radio. So keep it up.
Appreciate it. We have a lot of fun with it.
All right. Well, Ken, thanks for joining us. Like Mike said, we'll have to get you to do this again sometime. There's just too much more material, I'm sure, that we can squeeze out of this. And that viewer number is going to go up after this show. I can pretty much guarantee
We're
it.
usually right around the 250, 300 range. Just depends on the guests. So, you know.
Yeah. I just hope we didn't generate any more letters to the editor. That's what used to happen every time they hear a word come out of my, you do this, and the fans call you every name under the book and whatever. I mean, things that weren't even, we're talking about words that the Bible wasn't even in the Bible. the Bible couldn't even think about it being invented. And I say one damn, and some mother is writing a letter there on Monday morning, So I hope we didn't generate any. But if they listen to this podcast, they probably expected at some point in time. I'm not proud of my mouth, but at some point in time, something might come out that was, that's all right. That's what they make confession for.
That's right.
It'll be fine.
Appreciate it, buddy. I'm sure I'll see you at another game soon.
You bet. See you guys. Take care.
Right.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, I got one question. How do I get out of this?
Well,
I'm fine. You guys, I'm fine. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. See you later.
Kenny.
All right.
Later.
All right.